Warm greetings. Today is Saturday, September 21st, 2024. Meteorologist Ruben Garcia speaking. In this video, I will be updating the forecast regarding a Central American gyre that is currently developing over Central America and could lead to the formation of several low-pressure areas, which may have chances of cyclonic development both in the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico, as well as in the eastern Pacific region. In addition to the cyclonic threat this poses for the southeastern United States and parts of Guatemala and Chiapas, there is also a high risk of flooding over the next 7 days across Central America, where rainfall accumulations may exceed 200 or 300 millimeters over the next 5 to 7 days. Therefore, this video is of particular interest to all of Central America, parts of Chiapas and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, western Cuba, and the states of Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana in the southeastern United States. Let's zoom in on the infrared satellite animation, where we can see how the coverage of thunderstorms has been increasing over parts of the western Caribbean Sea and just south of Guatemala and El Salvador. This is associated with the monsoon trough and a tropical wave that is currently crossing Central America, and gradually over this weekend, we will see how a broad circulation known as the Central American Gyre will develop over this region. We currently see strong convective areas to the east of Honduras, and also to the south of El Salvador and Guatemala, and in both areas, low-pressure systems could form with conditions favorable for cyclonic organization. In particular, the low pressure that will develop in the western Caribbean Sea has a medium probability of cyclonic development, which has been increasing. It currently has a 60% chance of developing into a tropical depression over the next 7 days just east of the Yucatan Peninsula or in the Gulf of Mexico. What is important to mention is that this cyclonic development will be extremely slow, so we will calmly observe the progress and possible cyclonic development in the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and perhaps in the eastern Pacific as these low-pressure systems develop. Meanwhile, there will be a lot of rain over Central America. Here we can see the rain projections for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. As you can see, the rain will persist throughout the week, which could cause significant flooding across Central America and southern Mexico. The latest rain accumulation estimates project that over the next 5 days, between 175 and 300 millimeters of accumulated rainfall could fall in parts of Panama, Costa Rica, western Nicaragua, southern Honduras, much of El Salvador, and southern Guatemala. Additionally, in the Caribbean, rainfall accumulations between 150 and 200 millimeters are projected for parts of western Cuba and northeastern Yucatan Peninsula. Therefore, there is a high risk of flooding for Central America. Although flooding is likely, this event should not be as extreme as the one we saw last June. Let's now talk about the cyclonic risk, particularly for the southeastern United States, and for this, let's look at the global model projections. Let's start with the GFS model. Here we see that on Monday night, a low-pressure system develops just south of the Cayman Islands, and as it slowly moves over the Yucatan Peninsula, we see that by Wednesday night, it potentially develops into a tropical depression just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. Also, notice some low pressures developing south of Guatemala and Chiapas that could bring heavy rains between Tuesday and Thursday. This medium to long-term model projects that a tropical storm or hurricane could develop just west of the Florida Peninsula, and eventually move over parts of the northern state between next Friday and Saturday. On the other hand, we have the European model projection, which also shows a low-pressure system developing north of Honduras on Tuesday morning, but also shows a potential tropical depression or tropical storm developing south of Oaxaca and Chiapas. Notice the interaction it has with the Central American Gyre, where if a low-pressure system develops, it will likely move toward parts of Guatemala or southern Chiapas. Meanwhile, the European model keeps the low pressure developing in the Caribbean Sea relatively weak, but in the long term, it also develops a tropical cyclone, potentially a tropical storm, with a trajectory over parts of the southeastern United States. In this case, the European model projects that this tropical cyclone could move over the U.S. on Sunday, September 29th, slightly slower than the GFS model projection. We also have the German model projection, which also sees the development of a tropical cyclone south of Chiapas, and at least until mid-next week, it keeps the low pressure in the Caribbean weak but with a similar interaction to what the European model shows, first entering as a tropical depression or tropical storm over parts of Guatemala or Chiapas. Eventually, this area of bad weather will move into the Gulf of Mexico, where in about 7 to 8 days, another tropical cyclone could develop. Thus, the German model run closely resembles the European model run. We also have the UK model projection, which is very similar. The development of 2 low-pressure areas, one in the eastern Pacific and the other in the western Caribbean region. The Pacific one moves over Guatemala and Chiapas between Tuesday and Wednesday, and eventually, a tropical cyclone develops over the Gulf of Mexico between next Thursday and Friday. In this case, notice that the UK model has a trajectory slightly farther west compared to the European model, and under this scenario, it could pose a threat to Louisiana and Texas. Therefore, there is quite a bit of uncertainty, especially in the long term, although we are confident that a tropical cyclone will form in the Gulf of Mexico. Perhaps the tropical storm or hurricane Helene, though we still don't know exactly where it will make landfall in the U.S. The most likely scenario is that it moves toward parts of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. However, I repeat, this is a long-term forecast, and much could change over the coming days. This uncertainty in the trajectory of the future tropical storm Helene, as well as the potential for development south of Chiapas and Guatemala, can be seen in the Ensemble members of the GFS model, where there is a lot of uncertainty about exactly where the tropical cyclone could develop in the Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico. However, this model does show some tendencies indicating that it could eventually pose a threat to Georgia and Florida. Also, note that many members develop a tropical depression or tropical storm moving near or over Guatemala and Chiapas, so it's important for those in southern Chiapas and Guatemala to monitor this situation. Additionally, some members also pose a risk for western Cuba, while for the Yucatan Peninsula, no direct impact from a tropical cyclone is projected at this time. In general, the Ensemble members of the European model align with this idea, a strong low-pressure system moving over the Yucatan Peninsula, but it's not until it reaches the waters of the Gulf of Mexico that cyclonic development could occur. In this case, the European model members show a much more westward trajectory, posing a threat to the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Also, many members develop a tropical storm south of Chiapas and Guatemala. In summary, we have a lot to calmly monitor over the next few days. First, a Central American gyre will be establishing itself, and a low-pressure system will likely develop in the western Caribbean Sea, as well as in the waters of the eastern Pacific. The low-pressure system that will develop in the Caribbean Sea will likely pass near or over the Yucatan Peninsula or western Cuba. However, it is projected that it will not have cyclonic development before passing through this region. It will be in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico by the middle to the end of next week, where we could see the development of a tropical storm. Also, remember that there is still a lot of uncertainty about whether it will take a path toward the state of Florida or maintain a more westward trajectory, possibly moving over Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. The important thing is that any direct impact on the southeastern United States will occur in about 7 to 9 days, so there will be plenty of time to monitor and prepare in case a hurricane threatens. Meanwhile, we will continue to monitor the situation in Central America due to the risk of flooding, particularly for Panama, Costa Rica, western Nicaragua, southern Honduras, Guatemala, and Chiapas, and for all of El Salvador. Although with lower chances, we will also monitor for the possibility of tropical storm development before entering Guatemala and Chiapas. Well, that's all for this video, and to stay informed about this forecast, I invite you to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to receive notifications when I post new videos. I hope everyone has an excellent day.